Okay, another day, another racket. In this particular case, I am a little ambitious this time. I'm going with a hybrid with multi in the mains and poly in the crosses. Or is that, yeah, it's like the soft string in the mains and the stiff string in the crosses. I strung it for someone not too long ago and actually felt kind of nice. So I figured, you know what? I got 2 rackets. One of them doesn't have strings on it yet. Might as well see what I can get away with. And let's see how this first cross works. Let's see, getting there. Okay, looks like I'm not gonna make a fool of myself today. Now, gotta put the string in, or put the clamp in, and tighten it up. We in business. Nice. So, one thing I've been thinking about today, or for a while recently, is somewhat regarding mental fortitude on the court, or at least kind of the mindset for getting the most out of your time on court, whether it be a performance in competition or just getting yourself to the state where you can start playing tangibly better, especially because it's easy for there to have a lot of effort and not too much out of it. My coach used to tell me back in the day was, practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. So the things you practice, the way you practice, there's no guarantee that you're going to get better out of it. You're just building a habit that's going to become permanent or stronger, really. And obviously at the time, 16, 15, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, one thing my coaches say is youth is wasted on the young. So as I'm a little bit older, unfortunately I kind of see where he's coming from with that. But yeah, with a little bit of age, a little bit of time for self-reflection, things start to make a little more sense. In college, I got like a D in systems, but I think an A in feedback. 2 classes which are very, related to each other. The first semester I had no idea what was going on, and then the second semester for the next class, things clicked. And I was like, so it helped me kind of understand what I should have understood in that first class, but it didn't really kick in into the second class. So although it didn't help me with my systems grade, it helped me with my feedback grade. So one thing I've noticed in myself with regards to how I approached performance, how I approached competition and whatnot was, I guess you can say I had, I don't want to say a split personality, but tennis is a lonely sport, so sometimes you do things to kind of keep yourself entertained out there, in your head. And looking back at what my coach used to praise me for and used to kind of push me to take on was not thinking so much on the court. He liked to describe knowledge in tennis as either conscious competence or unconscious competence. Conscious competence means effectively, you know what you're doing. You can explain why you're doing things. What you're doing, why you're doing things. Again, like something, you know how to explain it, how to teach it, stuff like that. Versus unconscious competence, where you're doing something, but you don't quite know how to explain how or why you're doing it. So again, it's kind of like say a person who's really good at piano or something like that. You know, some people, they can perhaps explain exactly what they're doing. Oh, you know, my fingers are moving in this particular pattern. You know, it's this, or that, or that, or that. Like they can explain the notes they're playing, the chord or whatever. They can, you know, perhaps teach it by articulating the details of it. Versus a person who might not be able to really explain, like they kind of work off the feel of it. So it's hard for them to explain what's going on in their head, but they can play. And growing up, it's funny, my sister and I had kind of opposite personalities in this regard. You know, my sister was the one who, once she started getting instruction, like formal instruction about tennis, she got pretty good. Like, she was whipping up on people and all that jazz. And, you know, when we would ask her, like, you know, what she's doing on court, she's like, I don't know, I'm just hitting it. I'm just hitting it to where they're not. Like, her description of what she was doing was very, you know, kind of like anticlimactic. Like, you think there's some secret formula, like, no, I'm just hitting it to where they're not. And, you know, so for her, it was all unconscious confidence. Like, she just knew what to do. Didn't really need to explain what she was doing, why she was doing things, but she just did it. Versus me, I was very good at explaining what I was doing, why I should be doing it in a certain way, like what I did wrong, what I did right. I can break down how a match went. I can break down strengths and weaknesses. I can break down strategies. But in a match, it just, you know, often, too many times it just wouldn't click. I would, I don't know if you would describe it as not necessarily like not putting a fight, but kind of like inefficiently struggling, and overthinking, overcomplicating, and ultimately just not being able to perform. There was a latency in my decision making. Like, you know, I knew what I had to do, but it's just hard to do it. I guess there are better analogies. Like, say a person, you know, wants to get healthy, lose weight. You know, one person is, you know, I'm like the kind of person who say I'll be counting calories, kind of log workouts, but having a hard time consistently going to the gym or consistently working out or having too many cheat meals because of stressing myself over the task at hand. You know, versus someone like my sister, just, you know, she was always mentally in there. You know, she had the fight, and, you know, at her, really, the only thing she needed from the coach was just a little bit of, you know, some basic strategy, just some reminder to, you know, manage her fighting spirit so she didn't get a little too aggressive with herself. But otherwise, it was, you know, for her, it was pretty, again, a pretty straightforward experience. And, you know, looking back at that, the way I guess I would describe kind of that phenomenon for myself was, for me, I spent a lot of time with myself as a spectator versus a performer. So what I mean by that is, well, really, you know, if you're a parent, like, imagine watching your kid doing something, playing a sport, going through life, you know, like my son does jiu-jitsu. So oftentimes I'll be sitting on the side watching him, you know, during the drills, or even, like, say, especially during the sparring, you know, little sumo they do. From there, from the sidelines, you have a very good vantage point on what's going on. But you're not the one doing it, you're not the one who's responsible for doing the things. Versus a person who's doing the things, but, you know, they might not have the best view of the best vantage point of what's going on, but they're doing it. There's no latency in their decision, or there's a lot less latency in their decision and their action, versus, say, a parent on the sidelines. They'll yell out, or in jiu-jitsu, for example, bridge, go for the sweep, watch out for the back, don't turn away, don't turn away. And, all those words, and, the kid is just trying to hang on, like, it's not like the kid can really hear them. If they do hear them, if they try to, look over to try to see what's going on, it's already too late. Like, whatever was supposed to have happened, the opportunity for it has already passed. And so that phenomenon, spectator versus performer, it not just exists as a phenomenon, as again, a literal spectator, but it exists with your own self. Oftentimes under pressure, one kind of defense mechanism you can think of is kind of to disassociate yourself from the event that's happening. So instead of being the performer, the person being acted on, who's doing actions and is acted on, you're the spectator, the person who's observing. And that disconnect really puts a toll when it's by yourself. I guess actually an even better example, more relevant to my day is, trying to help someone, say a coworker with an Excel formula over Teams, screen share. So they're screen sharing their Excel window, and I'm trying to walk them through a somewhat complex, not really a complex formula, but something that's non-trivial, especially if it's something like a fancy conditional formatting formula or whatnot, which is like what happened recently, and just trying to tell them to okay, this is the tab you want to click on to get to conditional formatting. This is the new rules. This is the formula you have to type in, and then in the first input for and, you have to type in, is blank this cell, but make sure you when you click on the cell, you remove the lock on the number, because you want this to be a column-wise operation. You don't want it to. So if you drag it down, all those steps, trying to talk to someone, and most of the time, and trying to make that happen is, not necessarily frustration, but there's a lot of that lag of, okay, no, move up, no, you moved too far, click on that, no, you moved. So all that latency between the person who's spectating, myself in this manner, in this example, spectating and seeing, what's going on, versus the person doing that. It's a little bit, it's not the easiest thing to have to go through. Now in this case, if you can imagine how much of a not so great experience it is when you're with people. Now imagine that is in yourself, that same level of inefficiency between making the decision and making an action. And that's kind of what one of the ways I struggled, say against hard hitters. People can really punish the ball, which is most of the high level juniors or all those people, they could really crack a ball. And I'd say my biggest faults in tennis was not being able to mentally remain in the point. Basically, I would think too much to an extent, thinking, okay, I would kind of complain about, I'm not hitting the ball, I'm not doing this thing technically, blah blah, or I'm reacting too slow, or I'm ending the point too early. I would understand what's going on. I understand okay, I'm their backhand has a little hitch that I'm not taking advantage of it. I keep on hitting the ball too low, so they're able to make me run, and then when I'm running, I'm not able to get enough, hit a nice clean topspin. All those things would swirl up, and ultimately, I'd just walk off the court without the balls. And this happened a lot, and then among that, with all this, kind of thinking over this, what would do, the other source of stress would be, okay, if I'm not doing well, then there's going to be some tension with my parents who invested, a good amount of money in me for training and for all this stuff, and then like, yeah, they're not having a fun experience by watching me kind of pout and underperform, and you know, I guess from their perspective, it looked like I didn't really want to be there. When, you know, for what it's worth, I always felt like I wanted to be on the court, but making, you know, wanting to be on the court and you know, giving someone like emotional feedback to work off of is a different matter altogether. You know, and for me, from my parents' perspective, you know, they're on the sidelines, so as much as they want to, you know, help me, you know, do this thing I want to do, fulfill my dream of being a tennis player, it's, you know, there's almost a sense of frustration out of helplessness. You know, I'm sure, you know, for my parents, if they could just press a button and make, you know, to make myself like make everything click for me, I would be pressing that same button too, if it was as simple as pressing a button to make things click for me on court. But you know, it's not quite as simple as that. It's not just one button, it's a series of buttons you have to press in a specific order with a specific timing to, you know, in order to get something out of it. And you know, that's definitely a challenge. And so one of the things I've, you know, I guess it really kind of started to make sense late college is when I started, not just like, you know, I was still, you know, playing for the college team and whatnot, and still trying to keep myself somewhat in shape for, you know, the occasional men's tournament or whatever. But I was like involved with teaching people a lot more. You know, starting off with people on my own team. You know, one person I knew from juniors who, you know, wanted to walk on. You know, I think we're both the same year, so we were both going to our senior year. He wanted to walk on to his team, which is, you know, D1. And you know, he was in the neighborhood for a few weeks, so we would, you know, hit, and I would, you know, take some footage of practices, of matches, and you know, just help him out and whatnot. And from there, I guess I was leveraging my skill at being a spectator, I suppose, being able to not have to, you know, leverage my skills of being able to do the thinking and planning, but not necessarily be responsible for the performance in and of itself. That kind of, I guess it helped. You know, I guess it, you know, he ended up, if I understand, he did make his team. And other people I was helping at the time, they did, you know, they made the improvements and I guess reached whatever goal they wanted to do at the time. But, you know, looking back, that's the best way I could describe it. When you want to perform, you have to have the mind of a performer. And a lot of, you know, making things work in tennis is really most things, most sports in general, or most activities in general, come from doing all the preparation to allow yourself to behave as a performer. Person doing actions, and all your thoughts and decision making are kind of done as interrupts, I guess. And another thing that comes up to mind. You know, in college, I started working, you know, various mechanics projects and whatnot, programming Arduinos. Now, normally, like the first, it's, I could say freshman, sophomore year, I was mainly doing the mechanical design. Yeah, I wouldn't really care about the electronics so much. I'd do the, you know, the 3D modeling, 3D printing, laser cutting, machine work to build, you know, random robots and whatnot, and then the EEs would do the programming itself. But at one point, I found myself having to do a little bit myself, right? Like it was a group project where we all had to work on, you know, things equally to an extent. And so one of the things that I kind of found interesting at the time was the concept of interrupts in programming, for an Arduino microcontroller in particular. Now, to give you some context, when you're designing some code to get a robot to perform something, oftentimes there are certain decisions that you want to be able to happen quickly. So as soon as whatever inputs or input or condition is met, an action gets performed. Little to no latency. And the way to do that is with interrupts, where you set aside one pin, which takes an input signal. And in an Arduino microcontroller, you set this to a condition. Either it goes from low to high, from high to low, something along those. Like it's almost like a switch, If a switch goes on, the microcontroller just stops whatever it's doing and does a certain command. Like there's no, it's almost like it's just on standby. This whole part of the circuit is on standby, waiting for one thing to happen, and then boom, it's going to do it. And I was like, after a while, I kind of had the thought, it's kind of like how I'm supposed to treat my matches. I have my strategy. My coach gave me a very basic strategy. And looking back, it was tailored toward having that interrupt. So as an example, okay, hit cross court, hit cross court, and keep on hitting cross court. Top spin, good net clearance. As far as stepping back and thinking about why you're doing that, okay, you're trying to get someone to kind of move back a bit, using depth with top spin to push them back, and if they want to take the ball on the rise, they take a few steps back to let the ball kind of fall back down. Boom, you're backing them up, giving yourself your own breathing room. And as soon as you get either a short ball or a ball up the line, you just attack the other side and come to net. That was it. That was pretty much, for the 3-4 years, that was pretty much the extent of strategy. And a lot of other stuff comes down to, okay, how do you force that? How do you ensure that that's going to happen? Okay, well maybe, say oftentimes the backhand side is a little bit weaker, so maybe you try to force that a forehand to backhand exchange, your forehand to their backhand, or even if you're backhand, backhand to backhand exchange, an exchange where that interrupt will probably occur. And if something happens, then you try to reset. A slice, for example, can help reset the pace. But ultimately, you're not really thinking so much. You're just performing an action, and then a part of your brain is just kind of constantly on standby. As soon as a condition's met, you just perform another set of actions. And so there's no latency in your decision making. There's no, I'm gonna they're hitting it to me, they're hitting it here or something like that. I probably should have put more string in this. Can I? Yes, okay, I'm gonna not mess this up by putting plenty of slack. Plenty of slack in this. There we go. Not gonna dung goof this time. Okay. So I really guess a way in your daily life, right? Say if you're trying to cook something. A common thing people do these days is they'll warm something up in the microwave. So yes. And the reason why a microwave is pretty efficient in that regard is there's not much thinking. You set a timer, and once that timer's set, you pretty much go on with your life. You go on with your life, and when you hear the beep, stop what you're doing, open the microwave, and you're good to go. You're good to go to have your meal. Now this is, let's see here. This is tie off the cross here. Beautiful. Keep myself simple. Last time I messed up the Parnell knot on this thing. And so I actually had to start a racket over with that other video and whatnot. So I'm just gonna do a double hitch here. Keep my life simple, and then learn how to do a proper Parnell knot another day. So I just go over and under. No, under and over rather. No, over, under, up. Let's see. Come on. Let's go all the way. Beautiful. And then do it one more time, and then I should be good to go on this side, and then just keep on finishing the rest of the crosses. But yeah, so again, there's that efficiency of being able to keep your bandwidth, your emotional bandwidth and your mental bandwidth kind of free by having these kinds of things where you don't have to think so much. That applies with most everything, and a lot of it comes down to a certain level of stress involved, right? Like when someone's stressed, they start thinking with the wrong part of the brain as far as like physical movements are concerned. Another little backstory. My coach at one point gave me an article from, I believe, the New Yorker called "The Art of Choking." And choking pretty much is when a person almost like forgets how to do some basic movement that they know how to do. Like, in tennis, for example, you see a person who's like has a lead, they're playing well, and all of a sudden they just stop playing well. It's like they've forgotten how to hit the ball, forgotten how to do what they've been doing for the, past however long they've been winning so far. They just forget. And it's not so much that they've forgot, is that they've rendered, through some condition or through some circumstance, they've rendered themselves unable to access the part of their brain which stores all that stuff about how to move, how to serve. Someone keeps on double faulting, or how to, just how to do their pattern. When someone starts doing like random drop shots, my coach used to call them bailout shots. Person throws a drop shot not because it's drop shots, has any real utility at the moment. It's just that they're just trying to end a point. And part of that, intangible when it comes to performing on court is, what are ways you can get someone to lose access to that part of themselves? Some people, it's a matter of, hit enough times their weaker side. If they're self-conscious about it, they might start overthinking, or they might start thinking so much about, I'm hitting all these backhands, my backhand is my weaker side, blah, blah, I'm going to lose the point. And as soon as they stop thinking about just hitting the backhand, regardless of whether it's a good shot, crappy shot, and they start thinking about the consequence of those things, they're no longer performing on the court, they're self-spectating. And once you do that, you're pretty much going to make life a little easier for someone to, start racking up those points. For other people, it's a matter of getting them tired. When it comes to, especially in fighting sports, I used to take karate. When I have time these days, I try to go to jiu-jitsu. What my son does these days, myself, one of these days I'll go regularly. One thing which is feels worse than losing is being exhausted. There's that expression, exhaustion makes cowards of us all, and otherwise also cardio is king, those expressions. Having that physical stamina, or not having, being able to keep yourself within a certain, level of exhaustion, or having enough gas in the tank lets you operate at that efficient level where you don't have to think so much about what you do, you're just flowing. And as soon as you get a little bit tired, it's easy to lose that latency, lose that immediate connection between your thoughts, your decisions, and your actions. And now you're spectating. You have to kind of, mentally catch a breath, physically sit down, stop what you're doing, catch your breath. So you're no longer performing. Now you're watching what's being done to you. And so, with my coach, looking back, I know one of the ways he addressed my overthinking was to basically work me to exhaustion right before I got on court. I remember one tournament, he had me on a rowing machine for, I want to say like 45 minutes, maybe probably closer to half an hour, 45 minutes, somewhere in that range. It's a full rowing machine workout. I walked on court, could barely move, lost the match, but not because I didn't play well, just more, I was just too tired to really do things. But that was still but if nothing else, all those voices I'll be overthinking things, those were very quiet. I attempted a game plan, just couldn't quite execute it, but as far as he was concerned, having that problem was a lot better for myself than my current problem of overthinking, which prevented me from, again, putting myself as a performer on the court. And so that kind of became the new MO for a while. I would try to work myself as much as I could, right before matches. And for the most part, I did start playing a lot better consistently. But another issue came where, due to my current fitness level / some underlying medical conditions, I would play well and then completely crash physically. Had a number of full body cramps and whatnot, a few hospitalizations, a few trips to the endocrinologist. But if nothing else, it was a lot better than just kind of crashing and burning mentally. Because physically, it's I guess not too much of a challenge physically to fix something, right? Improve my diet, very tangible. Just run a lot more. Especially cardio and sprints, distance running, stuff like that. I probably should have spent more time in the gym lifting weights. That's something that it's hard, I guess wasn't as natural consistently for me to do. It was just, I guess I kind of felt more enjoyment like running and sprinting than lifting things. Nowadays I'm a little better in that regard. But ultimately, again, it all came down to, giving myself enough gas tank so I could run enough to quiet myself, and then just focus on the game plan. Now, one particular match, I think this really exemplifies that method was, I think it was a senior in high school. I know I had a tournament. I had a tournament that was going to basically leave right after class, and drive over to, I think, someplace on Long Island or something. And I was like, you know what? Let me use the last period. I had a free period right before school ended, so I was like, why don't we just do a bunch of sprints? Just 100-meter sprints. Say 10 of them, and just do basically a really good warm up to get myself really sweaty. So I did that, by the time I got on court, I still had like a runner's high. Like I remember feeling, walking on court like, yeah, feeling kind of tired, but feels kind of good. And yeah, I end up bagling the guy without like realizing, like, until like well after the middle of the second set. I'm like, I just bageled this guy. And then we get into a tiebreak second set, and I start, my exhaustion starts to kick in. But I'm still like, feeling the breeze. I beat him at net. He says something. He gets something along the lines of, "Oh, you're lucky I let you win." I'm like, "Good for you. Have fun wherever you're going after this. I'll be waiting for my next round and whatnot." But summary, a lot of what I feel people do in lessons is that they're kind of putting too much brain power into how things are going, and that, it doesn't make life any easier for you if you're thinking too much about, oh, I missed this shot, I missed that shot. At a certain point in my lessons, I started to focus on like just very like the fundamental motions, like the turning, split stepping, taking, say I hit a lob, you're going to take take 5 steps back, and then just turn your body forward, face the court, and let that move your racket. Trying to give them as little to think about as possible, while at least making the things they do have to think about, useful. You have to do some thinking in tennis to understand what you're doing, have some sort of rhyme to the reason, but you really want to make sure you're not thinking so much that it hinders your goal, which is to perform. And oftentimes a lot of it comes down to when you walk on court, you have an idea of what you want to work on, whether that's being told to you or whether you kind of know yourself, and just repeating certain motions. In particular, one set of skills that I've been trying to focus on with certain people are maintaining composure under aggressive shots. Partly because I knew that was a thing I struggled with, and two, because it's quite easy to diagnose. If I hit a ball kind of hard, or I feed the ball kind of hard, or I hit kind of hard in the rally, a really common reaction is to try to like escalate back. I hit the ball hard, they try to hit the ball harder. I hit the ball, try to make them run, they try making me run more. Or they'll just try to go for the winner. As soon as there's a level of threat, they escalate too much, too early, and, lose the point. And one particular thing that you have to kind of, for me, I had to internalize, yes. You gotta be careful, you gotta make sure you get all the threads in. Was the concept of, it's fine if it takes you a bunch of shots to win the point. You don't have to have that very, very clear win condition where it's almost like guaranteed. Okay, I hit 2 shots to the backhand and 1 to the forehand, do a drop shot, then a lob, boom, the point's over. I can do that over again. I can repeat that very easily. Sometimes it's not as simple as that. And what my coach used to always also kind of go with me on was, everyone has an internal shot counter. How many shots in the rally can they go before they no longer can just go with the flow and they have to make something happen? They have to they sort of spectate and not like what they see, and then they try to do something to make it happen. And oftentimes, that was commonly he would say it's say 4 to 5 shots. You're gonna have to hit at least 4 to 5 shots in your pattern for something to happen. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. But you have to be comfortable. Once you figure out that shot counter, you have to be comfortable just keeping that at least that many shots in play before you expect something to happen. And so, again, some people, they start to overthink things if they have to hit 4 or 5 balls in a rally. If they're under pressure, it drops down to like 2 or 3. Versus if they're not under any threat, then they can kind of go on either indefinitely, or they can last a lot longer and whatnot. And half of that is not necessarily like a technical thing. Okay, their backhand has this little hitch on it, so if you hit the ball 3 or 4 times, they're probably gonna miss. It's more of really psychological. Okay, yeah, even if their backhand has a hitch, if they don't convince themselves that it's a problem, you have to win the point. You have to hit that winner. You have to force them off the court and do something fancy to win the point. You can't just let them give you the points. Which I guess was, again, growing up, that was one issue I had. Is I felt like I had to, my shot counter was very low because I felt like I had to do something. I had to see myself, convince myself, okay, I'm a good tennis player. I'm hitting this. I'm hitting these kinds of shots. So I would spend too long, like kind of spectating myself, waiting to see, to validate, my tennis, as opposed to simply just doing it and then save all that thinking and talking for after, only for after matches or off court. During court, immediately before, immediately after, you don't need to think, you don't need to talk so much or think so much. And so again, when you're on court, there's some motions you have to get used to. Okay, so you just work on those motions. Don't think so much about how they're doing. Let someone else give you the breakdown afterwards, or put as little mental bandwidth as possible into self-evaluating. And then at that point, that's when things start to happen, right? It's watch the pot never boils. But now imagine if you watch the pot, you dissipate heat from the pot. So not only is it you're actively preventing it from boiling by spending too much time on it. No, just let the stove go on high. And when you start hearing a bunch of bubbling, then you know that you're in good shape. All right, almost done with this racket. I think I've spoken long enough. Any questions, comments, concerns, grievances, suggestions, feedback, or whatever we call it these days? You know where to find me.